first, so you'll have to forgive any nerves. I've been swapped. For those of you who aren't acquainted with who Leila Khaled is, she is, I suppose, most famous, or was most famous in the late 60s and early 70s for having been involved in not one but two aeroplane hijackings on behalf of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the Palestinian revolutionary group of which she is still a member. And because at that time she was young, she was attractive, this was something very new in the news, she was very much picked up on as an iconic figure of the left, and became a figure on, I suppose, kind of left-wing student walls alongside the likes of Che Guevara. This biography is, I think, slightly strangely, given that she still has quite a lot of name recognition and people are still quite interested in her as a figure. The only book that has come out about her since an autobiography, ghost-written by a Lebanese journalist and academic called George Hajar, which came out in 1973. And it's come out as part of a book series called Revolutionary Lives. And the idea of the series is very much to not kind of try and paint images of heroes or of people that are somehow glamorizing political activism, but to look at the life stories of people who do devote their lives to political activity, to try and think about why they might choose to do that, and then on the sort of flip side of that, to think about what the impact of that political activity might be on their lives, because obviously devotion to a cause like this is often something that marks individuals' lives very, very deeply as they experience it. So I'm just going to do two fairly short readings from the book, which I suppose are kind of nothing to do with the hijackings or these big events that made her famous, but are, I suppose, designed to try and bring home, on one level, some of the, I hope, humorous side of some of the experiences that she talked about. And the book is partly based on a week's worth of interviews that I did with Leila at her home in Amman a couple of years ago, and also some of the more terrible consequences for her. So the first one, she was married to another fighter from the PFLP, an Iraqi, in the early 70s, and that marriage lasted not even years, really, months. And after that, she pretty much gave up on the idea of being interested in men for a good while. Until she met a fellow activist, also from the PFLP, nearly 10 years later. But as some people in this room very much know, nothing that might be perceived as part of ordinary life is easy for Palestinian refugees, and certainly finding another life partner was another of those. Leila and Fayez had barely been able to keep in touch, so when he appeared again in March 1982, she wasn't expecting him. Reaching her in Beirut had been a struggle. Jordanian intelligence had confiscated his passport on the way. And then, Fayez had to face his prospective mother-in-law's advice too. I was working in one of our offices, and one day I came home for lunch and found Fayez there. It was a big surprise to find him in my house, describes Leila. My mother was busy telling him, "Why do you want to marry her? She's always busy. If my son wanted to marry a woman like this, I wouldn't accept it. So because your mother's not here, I'm your mother, and I'm advising you not to marry her." Fayez had been a PFLP activist in the West Bank and had been jailed and then deported by the Israeli authorities in 1970. He'd been unable to see his family since. I said, why? I'm not a bad person. I think I'm a good person. My mother said, I know, but you can't live like other women. Fayez told her that he was also a member of the PFLP, that he'd been jailed by the Israelis and so on. And she said, yes, I know, but she's already had an experience like this. He was the chief of a training camp, and look what happened. Despite her mother's efforts on his behalf, Leila and Fayez did arrange to marry. Typically, it wasn't a simple operation, starting with their visit to the Sheikh to agree the legal aspects of the marriage. She had a Lebanese passport, but Fayez had had his confiscated by the Jordanians. He was given papers by the PLO, but the Sheikh looked at them and said, what's this? This isn't a proper identity paper. Fayez tried to explain that he was from the occupied territories and had no passport, that these were all the papers he had. But only when Khaled threatened to find someone else to carry out the wedding did the Sheikh, who was friends with her family, agree to marry them. Having overcome the hurdles of papers and identities, all too common for many Palestinians, not just fighters, the couple and the Sheikh now clashed over their respective values. So he says, okay, he goes to open the book, he writes down the names, and then he says, how much money, recounts Leila. Because in Islam, the woman is given money by the man so that she has something left if she's divorced. He said, how much money do you want? I told him, I don't want money. I'm not a product. You know me. I lead fighters. I'm responsible for people who go and die in the struggle. He said, no, and closed the book. He told me, if you want to get married, you have to accept this. Fayez came to ask what we were discussing, and I said, I can't accept this. So he said, okay, 1 lira. I said to Fayez, give me the lira, and he handed it over. The Sheikh said, what do you want to be given afterwards? And I said, 1 lira. He looked at me and said, you're weird. I said, so I'm weird, write it down. On the other hand, because she had become this obviously notorious figure around the world, and of course particularly in the Middle East, the PFLP had been concerned for quite a long time that Leila would be the target of potential assassination operations by the State of Israel or by anti-Palestinian forces within Lebanon, and a number of PFLP activists, most famously perhaps the writer Hassan Kanafani, had already been victims of this. And although Leila was never assassinated, this fear, these issues very much affected her family. On Christmas Day 1976, however, her notoriety had its greatest impact on her family. Returning to her apartment one morning, she found her sister and her sister's fiancé shot dead. The gunman's intended target was Khaled herself. In 2008, a visibly distressed Leila described the incident. At the end of 1976, my sister and her fiancé were assassinated in my house. I was out. It was the 25th of December. It had been declared that the war had stopped, and the Syrians came in with their troops. We had been instructed not to sleep in our houses because it could be dangerous, because it was Christmas night and maybe the phalangists were planning something. So I told my sister not to stay, because she was living with me in the apartment. We didn't really live there. We just put our things there and then went out because we were so busy. Sometimes we'd sleep there. My sister and her fiancé had arranged to get married, but according to my mother, we weren't allowed to have a wedding party. She had told us a long time before, big wedding parties and the woman wearing a white dress, this could only happen in Haifa, where Leila's family were from, and which they'd been driven out of as refugees in 1948. And of course it was the war, so this was another reason we shouldn't have a party. But to have a substitute, she was going to hold a dinner at our house in Tyre for the wedding party and for the comrades, especially those whose mothers were in the occupied territories. So that incident was shocking and sickening for me. I arranged with my sister to meet at 10 o'clock in the morning to go to Tyre for the wedding party. In Lebanon at that time, especially in Beirut, if you give a time, you have to be exactly right. If you're a minute or 5 minutes late, it means you've been kidnapped, because this is the way things happen, so one should be very exact. So I came, and the apartment was on the 8th floor. I saw my sister's car, so I thought, it's 10 o'clock, she's there. There was no lift, no electricity, so I climbed. I saw that the door was open, and I said, aren't you ashamed to keep the door open? Because we had 4 locks, everywhere security's like that. I went into the sitting room. My sister's fiancé was sitting with his arms open. She was lying down. In that house there was a dark-coloured rug, so I didn't see her blood. He was shot in the head. His forehead was open. I didn't see the blood. I saw him sitting. So I came and sat beside him. I looked at him and asked, "Why are you silent?" I was speaking to my sister. "Did you tumble down? Were you sitting on his lap?" I thought this way. My mind didn't accept what I saw. Then I said, "Let's go." And because of course he didn't answer me, I was looking at him asking, "Why don't you answer me? We arranged to go today to Tyre, so let's go now." But then I saw some drops of blood on the wall. All the blood on the floor I didn't see, but I saw this. I began to scream. I put my hand on my sister, but I didn't see any blood on her. She was shot and she was on the floor. So I got my pistol and ran down, thinking that I knew who killed them, and I wanted to go and kill them. But after about 2 stories, I came back. Thank you very much.